reprendre.
Ah, oui, oui.
Si vous préférez. Il y a quelque chose qui va pas.
Il faut choisir.
Il faut choisir, oui, exactement. Non, non, non. Voilà.
Merci.
Je ne sais pas si vous utilisez la lumière.
Non.
Non,
Je ne sais pas. Well, is it clear? No. So, well, well, I wanted to thank you having inviting me. I'm very happy to be here, naturally. When John Russell phoned once from here, immediately I said yes, but when he asked me when, I said, I don't know, I have things to do, and finally it took time. It is not because I did not want to come, but I tried, so I am here. You will excuse my bad English, but I suppose you prefer English than French. So, well, I'll try to explain about geometries. At least there are two of them. The one you know best is the mechanical, the mathematical, the grid, or the calculated forms. That means forms that obey two very simple or rude rules. The other is organic, soft, and they don't obey, they express very complex rules. I feel that the one who expresses all the rules possible are rationalist, but generally people say that the other are rationalist, and that the other are order, and, well, I don't know where order or disorder are. What I mean is that personally I need both because they make a contrast, and without contrast everything is annoying. So let us contrast. As we are architects, I should like to show you slides. As my English is bad, I have taken big slides, large slides, and in a great number. So don't feel obliged to stay. You may sleep. It's dark. It's all right. So should we turn the lights off so that everyone is comfortable and see? Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, the whole story begins with not exactly geometry, but as geometry is the way of take any form into account and give the measure. The first measure is life, and this is taken in the Death Valley desert. These are plants who are growing in salt. Even if the circumstances are impossible, life is going out and try to occupy the space with its form, with its rules inscribed for millennials, and they create the landscape. The first little thing creates already a landscape, a history, a situation. The north, the south, the west, the east are different in each point because that exists. When two exist, they have a relationship in between, etc., etc. You know it. Next. Immediately they create groups. They group individuals or in a sort of a continuity, and immediately they create borders and forms, and they negotiate the neighborhood. Next. That is an image of town planning. That is our garden, by the way, where we propose, and the nature accepts, refuses, or changes places. Sometimes we propose a plant who seems to be unhappy, then disappears and reappears elsewhere, where she needs sun or no sun or humidity, etc. We don't want to order, that means to have an axis or a geometry, a factice, an artificial thing. We see that every form is the result of the neighborhood, and it's a set of relations much more than a series of individualities. Next. We prefer to work with that landscape than with another. Next. It's in town, but it's so dense that you don't see it. You don't see the environment anymore. The plants are the alone building materials that do not obey to the architect. And left that is a hedge was supposed to be a rectangle, a perfect horizontal line, but each year that the gardener did cut, and he had a heavy hand on the weakest parts that created these waves. Next, nature has always right and creates more form than the man. But classicism is inscribed deeply also at the same time in contradiction with in the body of the man, and these are hedges just done to protect the soil from the dry wind in south of France. And that idea of letting a little flower pot on the summit to express the axis is something very healthy, even if it is artificial. Next. Oh. Well, left, it's something taken in the classic garden in France. The other is dancing. Where the gardener had designed things so that they will be eternally the same color, the same shape, winter, summer, doesn't matter. Well, yes, remove the roof. Okay, thank you. Yes, the other is a photograph taken in La Loire, le Château de Villandry, where also that kind of artificial town planning is definitive. It's an image of what people desire, but not the alone image. Next. what certain people are aiming at is to isolate the object in order to master it and to religiously to have an object, a unit, not mixed with anything else, even if it is a wooden house in a garden or the Reichstag. We are supposed to walk around without including any other function that the sacred function of a church, for instance. You know that in Catholic rite, when the procession has to include a laic, a lay, a function which is not religious, you cannot say you consecrate a church. You have to have a benediction alone, and that is a sort of a law of repulsion. The one pushes the other away, and the distance is maintaining someone at a distance. It is not an empathy that a public space or a separation space should be a unifying space. Next. No. And in the same manner of analyzing, certainly, first with Gutenberg, then and Renaissance, Enlightenment, and the 18th century, and finally the 19th century, we are in front of quite a new object, which is industry. Industry is something who creates identical objects and not similar objects as before. And I've never understand why architects cry that to ask the industrialists to control building, to control architecture. And finally they did. It is a new material which is non-existing. Any handicraft material has a personality, even if it is difficult to perceive, and certainly it has not. It is neutral. It is something to be used because, etc. Next. What we have done with that is a sort of isolated town planning form. Left is Van Tongerlo, who is I don't know if he's a good or a bad painter because he didn't try. He just proposed that. It's a bad photograph, but primary colors, red, blue, and a white space, which is a non-space, which is the repulsion law from one form to another. Right, I feel it's the best definition I may have of modern town planning. Things like houses have no windows because they don't have anything to say to each other. They have just a door. You don't see it, but they have. And the form, the agglomeration, the form of the grouping is is that the path of the crane is easy. All the social housing schemes are of that definition. Next. The greatest guilty or guilty people in artificiality in artificializing the human actions, time, space, and objects are the Benedictines, probably, who they reinvent the clock and the time. And this is in Melk, in Austria, a corridor of 200 meters long. That is 600 feet. That is in one piece. Where is the measure of man, which is a matter of different scales, little, medium, large, etc. Next. The same thing in Rome, the Italian architects who call themselves rationalists do worship that kind of steamship, which is in the suburb of Rome in a wonderful nature on the edge of a hill, and is a mile long and shelter foreign people because Italians don't want to go there, and the other had no choice. It is an insult to any kind of culture. It is a box, functional, as it doesn't rain inside, and people live there, trying desperately to show plans sometimes, but it is not done for that. And the architects do admire that thing because of the length and of the inhumanity they call rationalist. Next. It plays very amusing games. Modern materials are a toy which is certainly a material of architecture, but to express what, right, it's in Denmark, I photographed that. It is a work of Arne Jacobsen, one of the latest work he did. They tried me to believe that it was the Ministry of the Communication, but it should not be possible with such a facade. Next. It doesn't express, these materials do not express any human attitude, any disorder, any warmth, any friendliness, etc. Even in cemetery, people are on one good line, obeying to orders. Others have different things. You learn much about town planning in the cemeteries. Next. Even in Buenos Aires, the cemetery I don't remember the name of, is some sort of a tragic, let us say, propaganda of a family of the people remaining here about these other people going along with all kind of style, with a passionate essay to say something without any function. It is a deep, it is an intense interest that we have wandering and walking around that. Next. In the cemetery, they choose any kind of style to say something. It is not the functionalist who is just removing all sentiments or all remnant of the past or any instinct, and instinct comes back very fast. Personally, I feel myself nearer the Chinese than the Greek. I don't know why, but I have more sympathy for that. And it is a choice we may do now, even do the American here in Seattle. Are they disguised? Are they real? Are the buildings disguised? These are questions. I don't have any answer, but I should like to keep the questions open. Next. That is between Cincinnati and Oxford. They tried me to believe that it was Léon Krier who did it, but it's certainly not. Just adding a porch in plywood to be someone is propaganda. Next. The same in a wine country in France. Another Parthenon. Next. The same propaganda, the bankers, no one knows exactly, choose the Greek, any Greek style to express their interest. And the Roman Catholic Church used also Roman style to, as a propaganda architecture, to show, to prove that they were mighty and they that the Christianity had to obey them. That's what they asked to Michelangelo, who accepted. Next. And I feel that learn the motorbikes, the motorcycles are sincere. Next. That's a lovely south of France village with boats, with fishermen, quite inhabitable and very well lived in. You don't see cars because they are outside. And in fact, it is completely fake. It's the work of François Speury, and it is Paul Grimaud. He bought marsh, piece of land with water, marsh, and had a development of several hundreds of houses. They are quite convincing of a historical site, much more than real historical sites, or sometimes defigurated. Next. These are questions. Speury has worked very geniusly. He lives there in that tower, seeming to be abandoned by the Arabs somehow, but it's petrodollars more than Charles Martel. And right, it is authentic, and more it will be authentic, even if it has been faked. Next. The question is, why should we practice modern architecture if ancient architecture is much more sellable? The Viking church is absolutely authentic, but it was not built there. It has been transported from 100 miles away to be rebuilt in Bergen so that people could admire it without going too far. It's comfort. So the pilgrimages, if you transport them at home, are comfortable. And they have taken the object and not the spirit of it, because if that church had been built on one side, the side had a virtue, and they did not remove the virtue. They have just taken the object analytically. Right, it's old Bergen, which is done with completely authentic houses, but also transported from menaced neighborhoods in Bergen so that they are kept and rebuilt on a completely fake plan. Where is the truth? I have no answer. Next. By the way, Walt Disney is a great American architect. It is not said very often, but it is. And also a good merchant, because he did sell all the Central Europe traditions and legends. And it is a town planning which is fantastically efficient. I don't say rational, but all the forms, all the architecture, is it an architecture, is calculated to make money, and it succeeds. Next. Is it an image of town planning as we should do? By the way, sometimes neighborhood quarters or student revolts deviate the fatality of architecture, and it is linked to the landscape. It is not in any place that some movement occurs. That is Seattle, local access only. Next. When inhabitants participate, sometimes, well, we ask them to participate, but sometimes it is not what we hoped. These are Le Corbusier's house in Bordeaux, in Pessac, when he did something like 50 houses for an industrialist passionate about modern architecture, which was Frugès in 27 or something. And then it has been sold to the inhabitants who simply hated horizontal windows. And it was badly built, no insulation, it leaked from everywhere. So they repaired and they put better windows and they expressed their own culture. My question has no answer. I regret that Le Corbusier has such an appearance now, but I'm happy that the inhabitants did something. It remains a question also. Next. If it doesn't go, you demolish, even new things, but I don't teach you anything in America. Next. It's in Brussels. And it is astonishing because we try not to demolish. That is this social scheme in St. Louis that Pruitt and I go disappeared. Next. In France, they do the same, and social buildings, social houses are destroyed because certainly people don't want it. Next, they have built for quantities very badly, and now they build for qualities. They should. This is a tragedy for me, because right, you see the concrete, the curb, the road, which stops provisionally for a while before attacking the hill and destroying that pattern, that texture that has been carefully designed and realized with these workers' gardens. And that is the combat between the age of bronze and the age of iron. And we know that the iron won each time. Left, it's the same more in a town. The asphalt is coming, and the old house to the right with its vegetable gardens will disappear and give place to another form which will cover the whole space. This is colonization, gentrification, etc. Next. We have to know that, and that changes are necessary, but that the scale is not innocent. We could remove the label, we don't need it anymore. I have been invited in Marseille once, 1.5 years ago, to see that building that was 100 apartments at the edge of a scheme and in front of a wonderful Provence nature with flowers. It rained before, and it was habitable in a shortage of houses. And, well, the building, no one knows why, but people didn't like to go there. They preferred another building, and suddenly they saw that on the 120 were empty, and then 30 were empty, and then they had a panic. Suddenly, everyone panicked and wanted to go out, absolutely, saying it is inhabitable. They hear noises, the windows are broken, the wind makes noises through the things, and they emptied the building, forcing some of them who wanted to remain to go out. And then the building, the closest building just of his side, is emptying. It begins. It is a sort of an illness. No one knows why. They ask me. Well, I don't know either. But I advised them to ask to the inhabitants. They didn't. Not alone why they quit, because they don't know, but how they could do something to maintain themselves and be something like a part of the building and maintain it with life. That means give them or sell it to the people that try. Next. I went to Lorraine to show you those images of one of the latest works of Le Corbusier in Briey-la-Forêt. The building is empty, completely. It has been built 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and he said it was a building of conform shape, conform size, conform to what, I don't know, but that was 350 families with 2 cars, because it's outside Briey, which has 15,000 inhabitants, a cafe, a grocer, and a Grand Rue. And they want to have a town and to be near something. And they don't want anymore to live in the trees with a wonderful landscape, alone, with a group, and boring. So it's empty. If you have an idea what to do with it, because France will not demolish the thing, but they don't know what to do. Next. The ground floor is walled. The first floor also, the second floor also. It's finished. And I did finally there, I understood why I didn't like Le Corbusier, because 25 years ago he made everything necessary to build buildings that should die 25 years afterwards because they despise the inhabitants. Next. They do things. These are photographs taken of 2 years of distance. The one added something in his balcony, but was beaten by politics afterwards. Next. Landscape are not done by landscape architects or by authorities or by any fast organization. You need generations to make a landscape, but if you demolish it before being a landscape, you never have a landscape. Landscape, I mean it with a European sense, is something made by the man. Next. In Toscana, you need generations to have that sort of form, which seems absolutely natural, unavoidable. Next, artificiality with millionaires, yes. And if the plants are adding themselves one after the other, taking into account all the environment, they create immediately a landscape. That is where we live. Next. That's a building we finished nearly 10 years ago, transformation of an old farm, which is invaded now by, that was supposed to be the entry, but no one did enter. So the plants have closed the entry. Next. It's a Brother Dominican's house transformed into that farm where they needed bigger rooms. We built it new rooms and other where we kept the old structure. Next, trying that the plants should cover and make it disappear. And even not to choose two authoritative forms. We try to design the window in the roof and the wall so that it has no form. Yes, it has a form, but not a strict one. No. Inside, we just transformed the levels. We kept everything as it was. We added rails and window, and that is enough. Next. That story of the university, of the medical faculties of the University of Louvain in Brussels, is now ancient, so I don't insist. Have been chosen by the medical students much more than by the administration and by the authorities of the university. They proposed me. The administration had nothing against us, nothing for us either. But we worked with a great confidence with them, with the engineers, with the administration, with the municipality, etc., for years. And after trying, everyone was trying to give an expression, a nowadays expression, to that multiplicity of faces of the student culture, which are not soldier, definitively, and they don't merit to have military barracks, as we prepared them generally. So if they are different, let us make differences for them as far as possible, and as far as the participants, the builders, the administration, and students can support it. Next. We made a bet on industry, but we didn't meet any industrialists that were open enough to understand what we asked. If you ask an industry to do something, certainly your hands and feet tied, and he masters you and your architecture. He dictates the form, the reputation, and the morality and the spirituality of it. You don't have anything to do more. We asked building parts to match an architecture of diversity, and finally we had it handmade. Next. But we used a modular coordination done for welcoming these building parts and make that they always match together. This is bearable even with that diversity if you create the opportunity for bricklayers, for instance, for masons, to do their own job with their own manner. This has never been drafted by us. It is impossible and has no sense. It has been done without intermediary immediately on the side. Next. And it is important to show that that freedom exists. We had also an underground station to design because it was so intricated into the buildings we had designed that they were obliged to choose us for the station also. Next. Concrete is all right with soft forms, and the station is covered by a concrete slab that we proposed to be in colored cement with pigments inside on a sort of a complicated form, but which doesn't need any other material to hide or to improve. Next. As we were on that irregularity, the columns are not on one line, but they are on a grid of 3 feet exactly. But the grid is not parallel to the tracks, so it creates complexity. And as we were there, we had molded a tree coming from Ardennes in polyurethane, and that formed the form of the concrete. Next. The partitions are glass slabs, nearly an inch thick, and in order that the short-sighted or bad-seeing people should not be shocked by, I asked my wife to paint, but 100 meters long, and instinctively, without time to prepare it, every kind of flower or beast to occupy the space. Decoration is not a crime, it's a necessity. Next. Even the acier inoxydable, that iron, is astonished to receive flowers, which is baked in plastic inside. Next. And that scale of intervention is necessary, much more than having exactly one brick for a whole building and one concrete, and that's all, with the sort of Calvinist architecture we were in several years ago. To the west, we proposed to protect the people by sort of an apron, transparent, with its own form. Next. It doesn't cost so much. The buildings of the students, we had proposed movable partitions, and we had them, but they laughed at us, saying that the students don't move them. And 8 years afterwards, this primary school we did add inside came back to us saying that they had no money, they had too many children, they can't refuse it, and they need 3 rooms, 2 classrooms and a dining room. And then we laughed, saying, you move your partitions, and we don't design it, we may help, but the children will design them. And we gathered these children two classes together to negotiate the borders between them, and for a whole week and the Saturday, there was a meeting with the authorities saying it was all right. Next, they can do the job, and they do it much better than we do. Next. The work we have been asked in Holland, in Utrecht, was to transform an old building in the very center of Utrecht for an academy of expression, dance, theater, diction, body expression, etc. And we tried to ask to the masons to demolish approximately the amount of hole in the walls, and then certainly to stop when it is reached, so that it keeps its own form without the intervention of any architect or any artificiality. And we removed the dangerous bricks that could fall and the sharpness, and that was all. And by the way, it's less expensive. Next. A beam has not to be a rectangular thing. And to the left, you see the old door is on the left of the big window and has been added. Just put a leg, a column more, and then the rest may be added without removing the whole thing, erasing the past, and having a rational form, rectangular, for instance. Next. They had a courtyard we just covered in order to make a theater, because they had no money to have a real theater. So it's covered, warmed, and it will work. It's not yet finished. Next. Just by adding that glued wood carpentry on the building, as it falls, as the oblique are, there is no geometry, regular geometry in it, because it exists. Next. The bricks as they are, they speak about the history. A staircase has not to be rectangular also. Next. The library, we needed holes in it. Next. Another thing is an operation in Normandy, in Alençon, where to the left you see these are civilized people, because they know how to dress, how to organize the procession, in what circumstances, what are the music and the songs they have to play for a marriage. The same attitude in a town produces the roofs and that waves of landscape in an old town as in any other old town. Next. They knew also how asking to different materials to cooperate, or to the nature, for instance, the iris plants on the summit of the roof knit the thatched roof, and the roof gives the iris humidity and protection, and all the houses have flowers in the spring. They were in need of houses, of social houses, because they had an industry installing there. Next, and what the municipality did is this. For those civilized people, I have questions. Doesn't seem to be rational, but they say it is. Next, they asked us, yes, by the way, it's a handmade. It's reversed, but it doesn't matter. Upside down. And the market is there and will gain, but we need probably a century to humanize this architecture, but that will go. Next, the municipality wanted to go on with the second phase of the scheme and the inhabitants revolted and organized petition, processions, manifestations, and finally they lie in front of the bulldozers of the builder, who was quite ashamed, because in that remote province they are polite. And they burned and destroyed one building, showing their autonomy. Next, they asked us, other architects, for other neighborhood, and we were asked for this one, and we gathered again the inhabitants, asking what was wrong with their their neighborhood. They said that the cars are going too fast, and on the principal access here. And we did not propose a red and green light, but to organize hills that very fast we did pour on the asphalt, destroying the asphalt, and reducing the circulation in sort of a trench. Next. And I saw, it was nearly finished, a little car with the driver's front touching the windshield, trying to see what happens afterwards, because it seems to be very dangerous. You don't have any visibility. And then it disappeared inside the trench, and then reappeared backwards because the bus pushed him. They negotiate politely, and there is no more any accident there, because they are going slow. And as the space is now low-scaled, automatically the neighbors are cultivating the gardens, and they plant flowers. Next, which never occurs on a big lawn who has no proportion. Suddenly they had money, a budget to build a school for 600 pupils, let us say 60,000 square feet. And they asked us how. We just followed where the pedestrians go, oblique, through the whole zone, and left you see the promenade, you see the path they did trace on the lawns, through a building, and from Alençon, which is north, to the country which is south. And we considered that this was a very solid and important geometry that was virtual, but was the form of a street along which we wanted to organize the school, so we did. And afterwards, they said us that that path did exist in the ancient times, and the pedestrians rediscovered it. Next. So we discussed with the mayor, with scattered volumes. They had chosen another architect. We did not do the architecture. And we asked the architect to choose as a building method not the heavy prefabrication in ugly concrete, but how common people do build their cottages with the same technique, which is less expensive. Next. And we installed that on the very asphalt, on the asphalt in the public spaces that are too large, in order to have closed spaces and little dimensions. And during the day, every hour, all the pupils go out and mix with the ladies who are shopping. Next. And it functions pedagogically very well. From above, and someone said that in 50 years, no one will understand why they have built these towers in that lovely village. Next. Next. In order to forbid that the school should close its street, we added institutions that do not belong to the national education, so they can't. Next. Otherwise, it's so easy that things close. But being busy alone with public space is frustrating when people have their own needs. And we proposed with that drafting that we should add something and ask to the inhabitants what and how. So we had a sociologist who asked to many people, and we proposed finally that scheme here to the right. And we realized alone as a prototype the one staircase with 10 apartments. Next. Which is done. And the second floor is occupied by offices for the social security who wanted to be there. And the other apartments are transformed inside. A kitchen for a bigger apartment was too little, so we added that box and a light on it. And we tried all possible materials to see if they are well. We added 2 houses, light wooden houses on the top of it, because a flat roof is always a building ground already equipped with water, electricity, sewage, etc. And it is a good business for them. They sell it now. Next. Another kitchen was too little, and we added just a box. And right, it's the image of what, questioning the inhabitants, what kind of form you get if automatically when people ask a balcony, you put the balcony there without disturbing, without trying to get an order in the facade. That was brutally as people asked. And it is a true image of what people are. I feel it's rational. Next. And I asked the municipality to sell all the apartments to the inhabitants because it's nearly paid and they should pay less as owners than as letters. This is one aspect. The other aspect was much more important. That was that if the people are owners, they care their building and they add, and they don't need any architect to do that sort of sport. They do it themselves. Next. But this did not occur yet. And it should have been an example of how they could, without us, afterwards, they could improve by actions all the 2,300 houses. Next. And we made a mistake that was here. We organized the open space of that place, and finally we saw that it was the affair of 400 families, and that was absolutely too big to be one operation. And we proposed that the cars, the parking lots, should be hidden by trees a little larger, and the slogan was, one car, one tree, so that they are in the shade with trees that don't make tears on the painting, etc. And the merchants we had hidden from the Grand Rue with our hills organized a little revolution, and they had a petition signed by many people, and the municipality was quite suddenly afraid, and they discovered that people do not like them, and they were anguishing. They stopped all the thing in order to have a reflection on it. But they decided to be loved, so they repaired the asphalt, they painted the facade, and they did not ask to anyone what more. Next. And the result is cosmetic. This is another thing. That is the workshops that the municipality organized to give place to people to work there, not alone to sleep there. And we gathered clients first, and we designed all the spaces following their demands, And then they disappeared, and we sold it to other people, so that we had a form already which correspond to real things and transformable and not abstract surfaces. Next. And finally, they do this, which is just to paint, to make it pretty, no more, and not with the participation of inhabitants, and that will ever be the same disgusting milieu. Next. Cergy-Pontoise, new city westwards of Paris. We won a competition, the alone we ever won, and for building 160 one-family houses. Pontoise is something like that, and to the right, should we do an architecture that should be so different that these ones should become ridiculous, with that sacred sense of the axis from the door, the trailer, the car, the lawn, and they care so much about things. It is not my culture, but it seems to be very important. So who is right? Next. We declared no inhabitant, no plans. So we waited until we could have inhabitants. We invite them to picnics on the ground and worked on models. Next. And we asked them to design themselves their houses. For instance, this. Some of them very carefully did design it. Some others did not, and we designed the plans with them, etc. Next. The Di Carlo Antonino designed his house that was probably the house of his mother in south of Italy, with the central corridor, the big garden with the door at the rear, at the back, a door at the south facade without any window, and all the dimensions were there. We copied it, and he corrected. He said that we made fault because he didn't want exactly that. So we had to copy it exactly. Next. We went as far as we could within our own cultural limits. Next. And that bad taste, let us say, our present is a sense that the freedom has been guaranteed. Each time they proposed something, for instance, a piazza, we made another master plan to match the whole thing. It is not alone the work of the people, because sometimes I refused what they proposed for clear reasons. And it is not alone my work, but I recognize that it is my structure with their addition, with their projects. Next. We tried to explain as carefully as we could how it could do and what the negotiations between neighbors should create a space. Happily, we had just one room always to meet, and we had organized 57 meetings, which was crazy. Next. Next. And it is built, and it is exactly nothing. It is as banal as any suburb in any French city, with people going walking, and rear the back of the streets with the guards. Next, with posts with bulbs to public space. But as soon as they went in, they began to transform. And I never say about my work if I'm happy or not. It's done, it's done. And here, for the first time, I say that it is a success. and letting some pockets so that they could have earth to plant climbing plants, ivy, etc. And they organized, we didn't do that, they added a garden of 2 feet wide with flowers in it, with a barrier leading to nothing. With that sort of an image, I'm not able to imagine that, and they needed that sort of intermediary of in-between space between the front door and the street, because it's a vulgarity to open directly on it. And the marquise and the other garden, and every time we come back to the scheme, to the ensemble, we find new things. Next. For instance, to the right, the grey concrete blocks have been added by the inhabitants. The white, we had done it. And immediately they go farther, and they keep that sort of form in staircase also that we proposed. Left, I have never designed that. Next. The street is just pouring asphalt and limiting it by some pavements so that trucks know where they are the right to go and the others to park. Next. It is soft and fluent. The flower pots right is a sign of that the people do trust the others. It is not to be stolen, and it is a country confidence. It's a trust. They show what they have inside to the outside. Next. Oh. They don't stop adding things. If it is my culture, I feel it doesn't matter. The important thing is that they live inside, and that they are owners, but they transform and maintain the whole thing instead of being like in a trailer in a non-landscape. Next. And the first phase was 43, and the second phase, 43, that has been sold. The second phase is to be let, and you see the same contagion. Even the letters are adding things. Next. And we did not want to remove the accidents. The street is curved, so the lots are not, and the the roofs are complicated because of something happens here. And the neighbor has planted his roses on lattices and makes its own landscape. Next. Mr. Lebris works in a concrete fabric and proposed me that sort of balustrade, and I said yes, and he did it in his house, and now he proposed that to the neighbors. It's the contagion. Next. The town planning, the organization of the site, is what I could call an animal town planning. When the envy, the instincts, and the cultural structures are heard and translated into space, either they do it themselves, either I copy it without too much knowing what I'm doing, creates that thing that is absent now certainly for 50 years already, because we became rationalists. But I feel that it is rational to try to understand that culture, which is fantastically richer than any book about town planning. Next. They designed entries, impossible to design. Next. By the way, I feel that I had a fantastic opportunity to do it, and I will never have anymore such an opportunity to go so far. I think it's impossible. Next. Marne-la-Vallée, a new town eastwards. We had to design 110 apartments and houses, and the ministry asked us and subsidized us also to explore what we should do with heavy concrete prefabrication systems and computer-aided design and participation of the inhabitants. We had 80 collective, half collective they say, that is maximum 4 levels. To the left you see them, and 30 one-family houses. Next, the 80 are built. This means, this shows to the right that we chose a concrete system, but it is so boring that we chose also a wooden system to put on the concrete, and we chose all the available materials in that region that time, and left you see all the materials, each one has its own color. Why should we refuse ourselves a material if it exists? Next, there is no rule of choosing one instead of others. I saw a second-hand Hewlett-Packard with a Benson plotter, etc. Without knowing anything, I bought it second-hand, and with a programmer who began to improve the little program we had inside, and we went on. The aim was to make computer-aided design as anyone else, but cheaper. Secondly, and probably first, to try to explain in perspective and non-sophisticated perspective, to explain with these images to inhabitants or quarter committees or people who don't read plans how it should be like, and it should be not realistic but abstract enough that people should try to reconstruct a reality after that image. Next. After that Hewlett-Packard, we had the Japanese, and now it runs on any IBM compatible, probably except IBM. And the last ambition was to exchange any data with anyone else, but this is not the case now because all the programs are closed, the computers are closed, everything is closed. These are libraries we had, and these are the plans as we plotted. Next. That is 4 years ago, when no one had anything else than big materials, like the wonderful machines you have, Intergraph, for instance, which publicity is you buy one and you throw 5 architects to the street away. That is I don't know if it is discussed in this country, that social point of view about computer-aided design. Well, prefabrication is always a little silly. The house is arriving on a truck, and workers are helping a heavy wall to take its place with nurses' hands. Next. It's built, the wooden house is on the concrete one, and we tried to have faces so that in a place you have someone to look in the eyes. The eyes are closed yet, but they will. Next. No repetition with prefabrication. That means that all the panels are the same origin. We tried to have several colors, which is little perceivable left, so that it is not the same color for the same concrete panels. Right, it is the defeat. We had a conflict with the engineers. We did not want to have these curbs who transformed a street in a ribbon, not in a space. They they had imposed it. It's silly. It doesn't mean anything. It is of no use. Next. Everything we may add so that the space should be not nude, not naked, and occupied. We choose it because with standard plans, with administrative rules, with the same area approximately for everyone, you had no way to create differentiation. Next. We designed also 30 houses with 30 families, and when the builder had calculated the price and we were in the price, suddenly the promoter was not anymore interested and put in the waste basket the plants, the inhabitants, and us. Next. It is always very dangerous to play with the authority of the authorities. Next. Some plans are coming. I saw a pavement somewhere, and I hope that in several months or years, the landscape will grow itself after we have finished. Next. Greenhouses to add another sort of volume and add variety. Next. And all sort of positions. You see a pavement there, it begins shyly to come. That is the sign of something. There is a flower pot also. Next. Next. Laundry is exposed, and it begins to take its shape with the soft lines we proposed that will be enhanced by the plans and by the actions. Next. Wooden houses also. Next. Another study is the exact perspective of 10 houses to be built on a south slope in a village in La Loire, but they did not succeed. They asked us 10 identical houses because it was for Electricity of France, and they didn't want to have conflicts with the wives of their employees. So we designed that as different as possible, and we didn't get the job. Next. But another nearby thing was this. In a village called La Roche, near Chinon, the mayor asked us to design 24 houses to be built along the village. Left, you see the village as it is, as it was. And I proposed him to ask to the inhabitants, there were 450, and to organize 3 meetings, no more, because I warned him and I said it is really dangerous to ask the opinion of your villagers, because you have to be very clear of what is already decided, what is to decide, what tolerance. For instance, I said, if the ground you have chosen, they don't want it, well, you have to be clear and saying that is already decided and you will not change. And he said, well, they know that, they have voted in the village and every information goes fast there, so they know that it is the ground, we have voted for that, but if they say, if ever they will say no, we could choose another. Well, we began the first meeting, 10 minutes afterwards, the grant was away, and the villagers said, we have always said that it was the nastiest place to put your houses. We refused that. We have always refused it. So the mayor was astonished. He had never heard it. It's bizarre. I will not say the whole story of the 3 evenings, but the second evening, the mayor was out because they complained to the préfet because he was not there. He was not busy enough with the affairs. and he disappeared completely. He was out. What they said was very simple, but administration didn't invent that, didn't invent the reality. They said, we have ruins in our village. You like them, we don't. It's ugly. You buy them, you make your houses there. We have empty lots still available. You buy them, you build. And we have still some little houses that are empty. You rearrange them. And if this is not enough, you will build on the top of the village, not under the village. We don't want to have a colony of 24 foreign people going fast in their cars, roaring at 7 a.m., and get back after having done their shopping at 7 p.m. and not seeing them. And the weekends, they are again away. And suddenly it became some sort of tragic, because they said, we are old. The grocery is closed now for years because no clients. It's transformed into a cabaret, a cafe, and we drink our own wine we produce. We don't hear enough shouting of the children because we don't have enough. We need your future inhabitants. We need them badly. But we want to welcome them and to make that once they are there, we organize the feast, and we are the same community, and not in another sort of satellite village outside with rules of South African apartheid. So we tried to obey to that, and we had no opportunity to put houses on the top of the village because the promoter didn't want. That is his authority. And we did put not 24 houses, but alone 10. And please, where are they? It's on the right, they are there. And I asked to a friend of mine, from that distance to count the 10 houses, it is difficult to see where the new houses are or the old ones. That was what they asked. Next. Here they are from nearer. It takes the same space organization as the sort of the town planning of the village itself with the oblique streets, etc. Next. Wooden houses, as you do it better than we in Europe. Next. It's not yet finished, but now it's inhabited and people are beginning to have relations with the villagers. Next. Next. Nearby a school of 2 classes more, where it doesn't seem, but we don't have any right angle, and it is the same price as having everything parallel. Next. Next. The inside, where you have a corner demolished by the window in order that the sky could come into. Next. I don't like to speak about poetry in architecture. It is or it is not. If I speak about or not, it doesn't matter. But about the motives, why and how. That is also on our program, the perspective of the school in Belfort. Belfort is in the northeast of France, under Alsace, near the chapel of Ronchamp of Le Corbusier. And it's a technical school of 150 square feet, let us say. And we propose not to have an object in the landscape, but to divide that large area into blocks separated by streets, but real streets with two faces and as narrow as possible from time to time, and a Grand Place, a piazza inside, which is the courtyard for the pupils, for the students. Next. And each block should have its own personality. The one is the restaurant, the other is the mechanic, the third is the electronic, the fourth the couture, etc. And each has its own set of color, its own technique. It is the same price to have that metallic structure here and a wooden one in another corner. You have no threshold of economics in that side. And also that it is not horizontal prevented the engineer of putting it on his computer program. He had to design the whole thing by hand. So it was a bad program. Next. Next. They define spaces inside space where you may recognize yourself because it's always changing and you cannot predict what will be the next sequence having lived the precedent one. Next. Which is the minimum of politeness you owe to people, to students which will be educated here. The same structure in wood and the color that I asked my wife to design so that each building has its own set. Next. Concrete is paid by the cubic meter and it does not really depend on the form they have. And it is easy in a form, before pouring it, to have a counter form inside, and it's more than without. Next. We try to be surprised ourselves because after a certain degree of complexity, we cannot control the whole procedure. It's a sort of architecture which is not sculpture. I mean that a sculpture is an object. You are, in principle, outside that object, and you add or remove the material until you are satisfied of the object, and then it is finished. Here, we do not have an object. We have a set of propositions, a set of rules, a set of structures, so that we send the one through the project, through the future landscape, who mixes with another, with the third, with the fourth, with the fifth, etc., so that after that we cannot predict with the whole precision what it will be. An architecture, a functional architecture, is one thing you define thoroughly, completely and definitely, you multiply it, and you are absolutely sure, if you are able to read plans, of the effect it will have, what it will be. We don't, and we don't want, is hoping that that sort of complexity is ever changing because we cannot master the thing. Next. Windows. Next. Even, how do you call it, the carpentry, the wooden trusses, are three-dimensional. They are in the space and not a repeating analytical object that adds to the another with a link with geometrical form. Next. Next. That's the street, one of the streets, and we added also houses that should not belong to the education in order to be sure that we should have a mixed population. The streets and the place belong to the neighborhood and not to the school, so everyone has a right to go there, rather pedestrian than motorized. But the children of the neighborhood will come and play here, and the inspector of the school said that that will be a hard time because they will have conflicts, and it is so simple to close the whole thing with a fence and avoid any problem and be boring for the next generation. And he said that he was intended to take the risk. Next, a hero. Sound. Next. What we are on is rehabilitating that thing which has 320 meters long, that is 1,000 foot long, for 160 families. And I asked the sociologist I'm used to work with and a video specialist in order to question the inhabitants, to make projects with what they have said, to put it on video and to show them as soon as possible. But the building has a cable and we have a channel, and each time we have something we may put it on a videotape, and it is, the families have our programs on their own television inside on the evening. Next. They always answer nothing interesting when the sociologist asks it. They say that the bathroom is too cold, the kitchen is too little, the tap is leaking, etc. But one day I was with the sociologist in an apartment, and they say they were quite happy with that. They don't ask anything except insulation, leakage, and stuff. But the neighbors has a problem because his apartment is too big. He has 3 bedrooms, and the children are away. He's there for 22 years, and he pays too much, and he should get rid of his 2. But I asked, why doesn't he give you the 2 rooms? You make a hole in the wall, and that's good. He said, I don't need it. But the upper or the lower floor, they don't need it either. Why doesn't he move to a 1-bedroom apartment? There isn't. On 160 apartments, there is no apartment of 1 room. Well, and the other building there, it's the same. All 3-bedroom apartments. Then I proposed then, because there was no solution, to transform his apartment into 2 1-bedroom apartments. Next, and as soon as possible, we made the design of it. First, how the building looked when we looked at it, and then how we could add something, which is a slice, which is an addition, because in Alençon we knew that it was a good business, it was easy, etc. Next. And because of his apartment was at the 3rd floor, we had to transform the 2nd floor, who wanted to keep his 3 bedrooms. Then the complexity comes, and we proposed that. And they had the program on their television set the Friday evening, the Saturday and the Sunday, but a 10 minutes or a 15 minutes program is boring. So we asked the Ministry of Housing films, free films, to give at the same time. So for half a year, they have had all the films on architecture and town planning available in France. They became the best specialists. All the 160 families became the best specialists in architecture now in France. Next. Clichy-sous-Bois, as they say, an American commercial center. That means that it is completely blind to the outside by fear that someone should guess that someone is to sell inside. It doesn't work anymore. We asked to the merchants and to the neighbors with our sociologist how to do, and they proposed next that we should organize a sort of a grand place, a closed space, let us say of ancient form. Next. How we see that. Next. And what we did propose so that it could attract, give an entry, a thoroughfare entry, and give a sense of center in the old village that had been destroyed and replaced by these big buildings. Next. Elderly house we designed in Belgium for 100 old people, and for this we have 120 different windows in our computer library. Next. Computer helps diversity when you ask it. At the same time, concrete is poured on sculptured forms in polyurethane, polystyrene. Next. A competition I was decided to lose in Karlsruhe for a museum of a computer museum, architecture museum, exhibition of art and technology. Next. And everything is different, no repetition ever. A scheme in Bordeaux for 100 houses. Next, where we may explain with this perspective how it will look. Next. Next. What we did, I feel we are the first doing so, by the way, is computerize old architecture or archaeology. You have never any repetition of anything because it is old. Left is Bruges, project who collapsed, and right it's the Ospedale della Scala in front of the dome of Siena. We worked with Giancarlo Di Carlo and his laboratory working during the summer in Italy. Next. The building of that hospital has its origin on the 8th century and has been transformed continuously until now. It is of an absolute fantastic complexity that is a good exercise to computerize. And for instance, left you see the old goat path that climbed the mountain and is swallowed, is encrusted in the building. But radiographically speaking, you may see how it goes from 22 meters below the level of the dome until either a staircase, either the chapel of St. Caterina of Siena during the night. You have a better feeling of the building, otherwise you don't see just the facade, you don't see anything else. Next. A view of the dome and inside of the Ospedale. What I was sincerely afraid of doing this is to be guilty of cultural treachery. Let us say, if by means as mighty as that computer-aided design system, I help to murder the cultural actions of that place, it is a great guilt. It is not the computer who is guilty, it is me if I do this or that. The first thing I did was to get to the neighbors, and they are organized in contradas, they say. They are neighborhood quarters, and they organized that race, that horse race on the piazza in Siena. And they organized that for a year, and I wanted to see if it is authentic or if it is Walt Disney-like. It is authentic physically, because touching the people warmly, you feel that they have something beyond themselves that is much greater than what they are doing. They are conducting something from their parents to their children. If you computerize, that means you try to have artificiality instead of spontaneity, or of that sort of spontaneity which is not spontaneous, which is repeating an action which is still living and has several centuries of age. Next, I felt that if we fabricate, if we decide in the place of the inhabitants, if we organize the life of other people, despising them charitably so that we never ask them what they are, what they want to be, what they need, and what are their sort of decisions. If we organize rationally the building procedure and the way of organizing the landscape artificially, we will kill this. This is the contrada, the organizing the race on the place, and this is a banal street in Siena. In one afternoon, they organized in that street a meal for 1,500 persons, automatically, without difficulty, because they have a tradition. And I prefer French kitchen to fast food, even if fast food is the most economical. I don't say that it has not to exist, but you have to keep the choice of it. If with computer, you keep the choice, and if you deviate the computer out of the hands of efficient people, but of dreaming people or cultural people, probably you will get a depth, an addition in the layer of historical attitude in a culture. Next. They don't play. They simply repeat for centuries, every year, the same history. Probably they have forgotten the details of. Next. And that town planning, decoration, that addition of something still more important than everything they had done, because it's a feast and you have to say something to the neighbor collectively. With a good organization, you will be sure that they will never do it again. Next. And you have to organize the things militarily or with state officers to replace the spontaneity. In Belgium, they continue to play Waterloo. They have never stopped. Next. And that kind of landscape, which is the assemblage of different objects, of different subjects more, related by an empathy, by a sense of friendship, of conflict and peace, of proportion, is impossible to invent artificially. Next. And probably if the machine stops and makes peace with vegetation, we will have something. That's the last.
I want to thank very especially Lucien Kroll for the fantastic lecture he gave us, but also for the tremendous amount of subjects and issues we will be able to discuss and debate in between us in the coming days. Of course, the floor is open now for questions. In the meantime, I will ask Lucien Kroll to sign the book that he wrote, and which in French is our book of the library. And soon, he told me, he will send me English translation, which already is edited, but for a series of reasons will come later, and but we will be able to look at it. Thank you, really.